Love often takes unexpected twists and turns, but that just makes the story more interesting.
I caught her, and that was it.
Oh my goodness, I think I'm falling in love with this boy.
I told my husband, if you marry me, you're going to laugh for the rest of your life.
Join us as we continue to bring to life the Canadian love stories of romance, family, friends, and community.
Well, love is the most important thing.
She said, well, I already know how to jig, Mom. And I'm like, well, no, you don't. Because every time I ask you to come and jig with me, you don't. Yeah. She's like, no, Mom, I do. And I'm like, okay. I put on the Red River Jig and said, okay, show it to me. And she did. She knew how to dance. And I was like, oh my goodness. She's like, Mom, I've been watching you since I've been born.
I love to jig now. Like when that music comes on, you just want to get up and dance. Whenever you hear the Red River Jig, you just want to get up and dance. And I never felt that way before until I started jigging. And I love it. It is our ancestry. That is our culture. That is, it's beautiful.
On this episode, we meet Felice and her daughter Willow from Alberta. Their story began with Felice's passion for dance and turned into a way for Willow to rediscover her roots. This mother-daughter duo has a bond that's deepened by dance, music, and storytelling. This is the Canadian Love Map.
Felice and Willow, welcome to the Canadian Love Map.
Hi.
I have so been looking forward to talking to you, and I just love so much about your story, including the kind of synchronicity. Why don't we start with both of you just telling us about yourselves?
Okay, well, my name is Willow. I am really into the arts. I love instruments. I love to act. I love to sing. I love to dance. Ever since I was little, I've loved to do those things.
Willow, have you had any artistic role models in your life?
Definitely. My mom, 100%, my biggest supporter. Yeah, she has definitely driven me into that creative path. Yeah.
Felice, tell me about yourself.
You know what? I was just trying to update my business card, and I'm like, what do I put underneath my name? What I put on my business card was I'm a storyteller, educator, author.
That's a great triple threat.
Yeah. And everything else in between.
And would you say it's in that order? Are you primarily a storyteller, do you think?
I am, all my life, like even when we're sitting around with family, like even yesterday, sitting around with family, we're always telling stories about our life. And I guess, yeah, that has brought me into my teaching career. Mm-hmm. And then now more so into, like sharing Métis culture through stories. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that just comes naturally to me to say it through a story. Yeah.
I think of storytelling as the oldest form of human communication. And it's underutilized, in the business world today. But also it's an amazing way of connecting human beings because it really goes to the root of who we are. And I am so inspired, Felice, by the way in which you are communicating about your culture. And I'd love to know when that started. And maybe to answer that question, you need to go back and tell me about your childhood.
So growing up, I always knew we were Métis on my mom's side. So Métis and French Canadian and French. And then on my dad's side, I'm Bajan. So my dad's from Barbados. So we always knew that growing up, and we didn't live like in a Métis community. And my mom's family comes from Manitoba, and her grandfather moved over here when like the early 1900s. So we were kind of removed from the Métis part of our life. But my grandfather, who I would say he died when I was about around 6 years old. So I don't really know him too much, but the stories I've heard of him, he really valued stories because he was a farmer. And one day he just said, like, Sue, and that was my grandma's name, Sue, I've sold the farm. I bought an RV and we're going to go travel the Métis homeland.
Wow, really? So was his Métis background a real source of pride for him, do you think, all along?
You know, I think so, but quietly, right? It was in the era where, yeah, if you could pass, if you didn't look Métis, or, you know, you were French speaking, you could pass as, you know, just straight French. It was often safer to do that, right?
Oh, that just makes my heart ache when you say it that way. Like, I hear the generations of your family speaking through those words.
Right. And mom always says, like, says that, you know, he would talk a little bit about this and that because we're related to Louis Riel.
Wow.
So my great grandmother, Marie Catherine Lagimogère, was first cousins with Louis Riel. And so we always knew that. My grandfather always knew that. You know, stories were told, right? And he kept on telling these stories. Mom always said, like, they lived close to Saddle Lake, which is a First Nations community close to their place. They lived in Brasso. But Mom said, you know, Grandpa was always so compassionate and so kind, especially to the, you know, the First Nations people that would knock on the door and need help or anything like that. And so when he decided, when he retired, he decided, you know what? Yeah, he wants to learn more and meet the family, right? Because his dad came from a family of, I believe it was 20 kids. And his dad was the only one that came out west. The rest all stayed in St. Laurent in Manitoba.
That is amazing. 20 children in a family, right?
And then my grandfather came from a family of 15.
Wow.
So lots of them. So when he went back, like, him and Grandma just traveled in their RV, looked up our last name, which is Coutu, Coutu, and they just cold called cousins and said, hey, we're, you know, cousins from Alberta. Can we come and sit in your kitchen and listen to stories?
Oh, that's amazing.
And they did that for years. And they compiled all of these stories into a book about our family. And then he created the huge family tree with all 20 of the children on the top and then all of their families underneath. So yeah, storytelling is in my blood for sure.
I'm curious, when you were young, I'm wondering if you received that work that your grandfather did as a gift, or if it took getting older to see what an incredible gift it was.
Oh, definitely getting older. Like even my mom and their siblings, like when they first heard that Grandpa sold the farm and bought the RV, their first thought was like, well, there goes our inheritance.
Oh my gosh.
But now, of course, all of them, you know, feel the same way. Like, that was such it is such a treasure because we know where we come from. We know the stories, like we know little stories about our family and Louis Riel. Like, that's not in history books. Like, that's, stories of our family and how, you know, he would come to the house and just hang out. My great-great-grandfather had a butcher shop, so he'd help in the butcher shop in Red River. Then he'd come to the homestead in first Lorette and then St. Laurent. And when, you know, the Orangemen were out looking for him, they often stopped by the Kutsu residence and would try to see if he was there, right? So
that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I'm like sinking right into your story because it's a piece of history, Canadian history. Amazing.
So grateful to my grandfather. Yeah. Unfortunately, he passed away before he could really see any, like, the book being published or that. But yeah, I definitely say it's because of him that I'm doing what I'm doing. 25 years ago, I met, you know, Willow's dad. And he was working for the Métis Nation of Alberta, They were on a voyage from Slave Lake back to Batoche Festival in Saskatchewan. 6 weeks, they traveled by canoe and Red River cart. And they were just stopping in all the little communities along the way. And my grandma was one of the communities. And so just by happen chance, that's where I met my husband. And so he was fully immersed in the Métis Nation of Alberta. And so I was like, wow. So yeah, 25 years ago, I got completely immersed into our Métis culture. And that's where, it really came alive for me.
So would you say you went from holding you talked about your reluctance to have people know about your culture. So you went from this sense of reluctance to pride. That's quite a journey.
Yeah. And I don't know if I had reluctance per se. I just didn't have connection. We always knew we were Métis, and I was proud that, we were, cousins with Louis Riel. And I brought that into the schools when we were talking about Louis Riel and the family tree, but we just didn't have a connection, the Métis side of.
I guess what I mean is when you talked about being reluctant at times to tell people that you were Métis. So when did you really feel a calling to start sharing this?
So about 23 years ago, I started working for Aboriginal Head Start. I learned a lot about my culture and First Nations culture through the Head Start program, which Willow actually attended as well. After meeting my husband, the connection came, right? The community came. I was surrounded by community. When I met him, like I said, he was a voyageur. I didn't even know what he did. I went home, I was head over heels, and I said to my parents, I met this guy, and they're like, oh, wonderful. I'm like, what does he do? And I'm like, he's a canoeist. I don't know what he does. He's a voyageur.
He's a really good paddler.
Yeah, right? So, yeah, shortly after that, I got hired with Aboriginal Head Start, which I think was just, the beginning as well of me learning my roots. I learned from my own colleagues, and then from experiences I was having with my husband in the community. But I think where it really where it really exploded was when my children started going to school, and they went to a French immersion elementary school. And so they always celebrated Carnival. Mm-hmm. And they always wore the sashes, right? The voyageur sashes.
Right.
And so one time I said to the teachers, that it's not only French Canadians that identify with the sash, so do Métis. In fact, so much so that we call it a Métis sash. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, really? Tell us more. So I went during their Carnival, and I had a 15-minute slot. And I think I saw all the classes. So I think it was 10 classes throughout that day, 15 minutes each. And I had to tell them what the purpose of the sash was.
And honestly, it's crazy how much that impacted kids, because my friends now still talk about that. Whenever they see me, or it's I've seen a friend who I haven't seen in a little bit. They're like, oh, I remember your mom would come in and talk about Métis culture, and we would do the dances, and and they remember that stuff. They don't remember anything else from Carnival except for sugar on a stick. But
that's so cool, Willow. What was your reaction? You and your siblings, what did you feel when your mom was there talking about Métis culture?
Honestly, I was really young when she would come into our schools. I don't think I really fully understood.
Yeah.
I was definitely not ashamed of it or whatever. I only started really, like you said, the connections thing of really having a connection to it once I got older and started to really understand how cool this is and how cool my culture is.
Felice, would you say that you tried to get your kids interested, but, it wasn't as easy as you might have expected? Or what was it like trying to engage them in this subject?
Well, when they were younger, they had just had no choice. So we were always attending Métis events or functions or dances, so they just always came along with us because my husband was part of the Métis Nation of Alberta political scene for, 15, 16 years. We know a lot of people and families. And so we're always stopping to chat here and there. And the kids are like, come, we want to go get popcorn. And we're like, well, hold on. Like, we need to talk to this person and hear their story. We haven't seen them in a year. And then, 2 steps. And then, oh, they're so-and-so. And we haven't seen them in a year, So it would take us a long time to get to the concession. But, I feel like we set that foundation. And then when they got older, they started to connect in their own way. Like my son is connecting with the land. Him and my husband started hunting a few years ago and fishing. And, that's where my son is really going towards, right? And then, of course, as you had heard before, like Willow with the dancing, right? And what we do is when we share culture, it's a performance, like being a success or an effective teacher or a person who shares knowledge. You really do have to be a performer, right? You have to figure out who your audience is and connect with them, because it is all about relationships.
Before we talk about Willow's dance, I'd love for you to tell me about your relationship with dance, Felice.
Yeah, because both sides of my family have musical backgrounds, right? Like Bayesian people love, reggae music and soca and dance hall. So, big dance tradition there. And then the Métis as well as the French. I mean, I grew up going to weddings as a little kid. The weddings were huge. I think my uncle had like 800 people at his wedding.
Wow.
Like everybody was invited, like the whole community. I mean, my grandfather alone had 14 brothers and sisters.
Right. Oh, of course. Even just the family made it a big wedding.
Right. So like we were always at big weddings or big funerals or big, anniversaries. Like there was always lots of family around, and at weddings, there was always dancing. And so the little kids, as a little kid, I remember just cruising around with my cousins, running inside with the hall, with the live band playing, the fiddle player, the guitar, the whole works, running outside in the bush, coming back in, finally you flock down at 11 o'clock and say to your parents, like, I'm tired, I want to go home, right? And they're like, yeah, no, we're not going anywhere. We're just starting our fun, right? Yeah, that was fun. But for me, my spirit really connects to the fiddle, right? To the fiddle and the guitar. And so I would say, yeah, just going to these community events. I mean, every community event we went to, like 20 plus years ago, it's changing a little bit now, but 20 plus years ago, every event had a live band, and, they would be playing music until the wee hours of the night, and everybody knew how to dance. Everybody was getting up there to do the Red River Jig. And I just went along. I would just watch them at first, and then see the moves and practice them at home, or go up to them and say, hey, can you teach me this move?
Like community as a fabric. That's the sense I get from your description. We couldn't share the great stories that we do here on the Canadian Love Map podcast without the amazing support of Charm Diamond Centres. They are Canada's largest family-owned jeweler, and they're proud to be putting love on the map. The folks at Charm Diamond Centres are thrilled to be a part of your love story. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here. Now, it's my impression that you didn't really think that Willow had a thing for dance for quite a while. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we would go to these events, and beforehand, I'd be like, let's practice dancing so you can, enter the Red River Jig. And, the kids didn't have any interest. Right. And so I was like, I'm disappointed, but, I'm not going to force them. And then, COVID and they would watch me. Right. So I competed in the Red River Jig competitions for years and years. So they would, they watched me as a little kid. Watched me as they were little kids watching me compete. And, I wanted them to learn how to dance and to compete and stuff. But then COVID came and you could enter online. They had, you could videotape yourself and then send in your jigging. So
as a competition, as part of the competition? Cool.
Yes. Yeah. So the competitions, were online. You'd send it in and, they put it all together and you could watch and see who would win. And so, I asked Willow if she, wanted to do that, or maybe she asked me. I can't remember which way it went, but I'm probably asked her, saying like, would you like to learn so that I can, you can give this a shot. And she said, well, I already know how to jig, Mom. And I'm like, well, no, you don't. Because every time I ask you to come and jig with me, you don't. She's like, no, Mom, I do. And I'm like, okay. I put on the Red River Jig and said, okay, show it to me. And she did. She knew how to dance, like she literally knew how to dance. And I was like, oh my goodness. She's like, Mom, I've been watching you since I've been born. Honestly, she is so musically inclined. Like she just picks up instruments like that. She can just listen to a song and play it on the piano like that. So like for her, she picked it up just like that. My son had to have a little bit more practice, but honestly, just from watching me, she had it down. I was like, okay, like, let me start filming you.
Willow, tell me about that experience for you.
Yeah, it's true. I grew up watching my mom. I never really was interested in it at all. And I didn't really ever like get into the groove of it. Yeah, until then.
What do you think it was about that moment and that contest that made you step into dance, if you will?
The money.
Oh, I didn't know there was money involved.
Yes.
Let's talk dollars. How much? What was the incentive?
Well, with Red River Jig competitions, first place, second place, third place always win money.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and probably because they didn't have to do it in front of a crowd. So usually, you're dancing in front of like 500-600 people, right? It's pretty intimidating because you're just one person on the stage doing your steps and you're being judged and, everybody's watching. So I think because it was in the comfort of their own home, I could record them. And, Willow was like, yeah, and I could make money.
That's the way to a teenager's heart, I believe.
That's true. I feel like I never really, I never really understood it. And I wasn't, I had no interest into it until then when I actually was forced into doing it, had a little like with the money and stuff. I realized I actually do love this. I love to jig now. Like when I started, when that music comes on, it like your soul, it's like, you can't even describe it. It's a beautiful feeling. You just want to get up and dance. Whenever you hear the Red River Jig, you just want to get up and dance. And I never felt that way before until I started jigging since then. And I love it. It is our ancestry. That is our culture. Mm-hmm. That is, it's beautiful.
For those of our listeners who can only hear you, I want to say that was moving visually when you said it's like your soul and your hands went up like this, this uplifting feeling. So does it feel like your soul soars?
Basically, it feels amazing. And it comes, it's not that it comes naturally, but
it's almost like it's always been there.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, it's exactly. It's just
always been there. Maybe it was dormant.
Yeah.
But once we allowed ourselves just to connect with it, it just explodes. Like it just feels like when I dance, I feel like I'm floating. I feel like I'm just floating. Time just goes by so fast.
Literally.
And now her and I get to dance together.
Yeah. Whenever we go to like events or just stuff like that, it's really fun because we'll just start spinning each other around on the dance floor, just dancing, jigging our heart out. It's so nice. It's like it really has brought us together. Our culture has really brought us together in that way. Yeah.
And that's magic for a mother and teenage daughter to have that point of connection as well. Like that feels really special, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My daughter is a very strong, independent girl from day one. From day one, we always say that from the moment she could talk, she was practicing for the academy to receive her Oscar. So yeah, like from day one, she was a performer from day one. But in grade 9, she went to a school just for performing arts, and it was out of our community. So each day we drove together. It was about a 45-minute drive one way. And I really feel like that year just brought us so close together because we had 45 minutes twice a day where it was just her and I. And I don't know what it is about driving in vehicles with teenagers, but you just, they open up, right?
I was just going to say, Willow, we mothers know that's a trick to, get you in a passenger seat when we're driving. And there's something I think, Felice, about the fact that you're not facing each other, looking at each other, but you're both, facing forward and able to have this exchange without necessarily looking right into each other's eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we had so many good conversations that year.
Yeah.
Like just about life in general. And I really feel like I got to know her as a person rather than this is my child.
Yes.
And I think you got to know me and the things, because I'd pick her up after work and I'd be so excited. Like today, I did the rabbit dance with the kids and I'm so excited. Or, today we went on a Métis voyage and I was so excited. So, I think it really started then. I mean, she got older. So I'm like, you know what? You should come with me. Like you should kind of see what I do, like the other hat I wear other than, mother and chauffeur, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
She started coming with me and she was just a natural, again, she's heard the stories. She's come with me to presentations and she's heard my stories as I share the culture. And then it's like, okay, now it's your turn, go. And she's able to share the stories and I've really felt like that just brought us together because it was like, it's such a passion for me, of course. And then for my daughter to also be like, yeah, this is kind of something I would like to, share with you too. And so, yeah, I felt like it was really something that brought us out of that, that conflict time of a mother and daughter's relationship. And it just catapulted us into like, this is the beginning of a new phase in our relationship.
Yeah.
You make me realize that, in that stage where mothers are perhaps frustrated that they're no longer seeming to be successful teaching their girls, especially, the girls are seeing them in their role model phase. And so maybe she's learning from you just in a different way, just by watching how you move through the world. And speaking of moving through the world, I have an Indigenous friend who said to me one time so memorably that when she dances, she's dancing with all of her ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there a sense of that in your dance?
100%. That's actually a really good way to put it. That's how it feels when you're dancing. You put that music on, like, that's so true.
I feel like that was dormant in us, right? Like that was blood memory. Our ancestors, danced before us, and their ancestors danced before us, right? And I feel like maybe it was kind of like shelved for a little bit, especially with my grandfather's generation, right? But then, yeah, with a new day, it was like being able to ignite it again.
I love that so much. Willow, I know your mom talked about you being musical, but I'd like you to give me a list, if you would, of the instruments you play.
Okay. Yeah. I play the guitar, the ukulele, the fiddle. I play the piano, the drums. I just recently started to pick up the harmonica. And is that it?
Are there any instruments left? You just should have said all of them. I play all of them. That's amazing.
Thank you. And the electric guitar.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Wow, that's incredible.
I have a company. My company's named Métis Alive.
That's where I was going. I was just going to say I'm actually heading toward the subject of alive. Let's talk about
Right.
that.
Right.
Love it.
So the company's name Métis Alive, and so it started off with just me doing my present, sharing culture in the classroom, and then we branched off and we have like traditional workshops that my cousin hosts or organizes, and then my brother makes these beading kits. And then I said to my daughter, I'm like, I can see you taking this over one day, because she's been coming with me, and as I said, she's learning my stories and she's learning the way I do it. But I said to her just the other day, right?
Yeah, about
you want to say?
Yeah, so I am also an actor. I do theater. I was just in a bunch of plays this week for my school, and when the business is passed down to me, what I think about is conjoining those stories into play works. So being able to put on a play and tell those stories, have people come in and act out those stories. And that would be a way to teach people about our culture and what goes on. Like I could have people reciting the story about how Louis Riel came and hid with, what was it, our cousins? What he was?
Oh yeah, the story, yeah, about one time when the Orangemen were looking for Louis Riel. He was at our ancestors' place, great-great-grandmother's place, and when they heard that they were coming around to look for him, they opened up the trap door and put him in like the root cellar, right? Closed the door, and then great-great-grandmother sat over the trap door on her rocking chair, and then fluffed out her big skirt, right?
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
And so then they came to the door and they're like, where is Louis? Where is Louis Riel? And they're like, and great grandma's like, well, he's, underneath my skirt. And they're, like, you foolish old woman. Like, this is serious business. We don't got time for, for all of this. Where is he? And she's like, well, he's underneath my skirt. And then they're just like, okay, whatever. And they left. But I mean, kind of technically,
Wow.
he is underneath the skirt.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I said to Willow. I'm like, I don't want you to just be me. Like, I want you to share our culture the way you would share our culture. I want you to do you. So I said to her, she could, like, she's a year away from graduating. She could form a Métis Alive theater company.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, 2.0. Right? She's
Exactly.
new
Like,
2.0.
Yeah, and she's been even writing music. Like her and her friend, he'll play the guitar and she'll just start, singing, a song that just comes to her, right? I mean, you could create songs and plays and, share this culture in your way.
And am I right, Willow? You're also sharing your culture through a little sewing kit?
The capotes?
Oh,
The
right.
capotes?
Yes.
Yeah. Just tell me about that before I let you go. I really am so curious about that. What is a capote, first of all?
A capote was, it's practically a coat that was made by the Métis people. It's made of a warm wool and it's really just a coat.
Made out of what?
Made
Where's the wool come from?
A blanket.
Yeah, they're blanket coats. We call them capotes. Like we make these little capote kits for dolls, right? And so Willow's going to go to the Vancouver Film School, and that costs a little bit of money. So I was like, okay, you need to start earning some money so you can help me with these capote kits.
I'm curious, can people just buy them online and you send them and then they sew them together?
Yeah, they're just little kits. Everything's pre-cut. And then I have a video on Métis Live YouTube channel where it's from start to finish of how to put it all together and sew it. Yeah. So,
well, Willow, I love your idea of bringing a theater component into the work that your mom has created. And it really gave me chills, actually, when you were talking about it. So I can't wait to see what you do in the world. Yeah. I can't wait to see this 2.0 platform. And I'm just so grateful to both of you for being willing to share your story with us on the Canadian Love Map. I just am inspired, and it's really touching to hear how your mother-daughter relationship was enriched by dance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
by dance, by culture, by singing,
music. Oh yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
And now I'm going to go dance.
Okay, yay!
Awesome.
Thanks, Felice. Thanks, Willow.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter. We love sharing love stories of all kinds, and that could include yours. So do you or someone you know have an uplifting tale to tell? Reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram using @CanadianLoveMap or email producer@podstarter.io. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map.